return to union. The consequences of this for Plotinus' mystical thought in general are far-reaching. The ascetic, spiritual, and mystical impulses are a natural response to the eternal procession and conversion of reality. The articulation of ascent or return involves active as well as passive moments, because these moments can never be entirely in our own power. In one of the most striking expressions of his own experience in the Enneads, on the descent of the soul into bodies, Plotinus states, "Often have I woken up to myself out of the body, and entered into myself, outside of other things, seeing a beauty of great wonder, and trusting that then above all I belong to the greater part, activating a best life, and coming to identify with the divine. Having been seated in it, coming to that actuality, seating myself above every other intelligible object. After that rest in the divine, when I come down to reasoning from intellect, I am at a loss how I ever came down, and how my soul has come to be in the body when she is what she has shown herself to be in herself." Porphyry tells us that Plotinus had genuine mystical experiences, and this passage seems to capture both the unity and perplexity of such experiences for Plotinus himself. Of course, God is not only, above all, the one, but also intellect and soul. Even our intellects Plotinus calls divine, or the God within. This passage, then, could describe union with intellect, but the phrase, above every other intelligible object, indicates that Plotinus probably is speaking of mystical union with the one. The active and the passive moments of such experience are evident in the active and passive participles of the verb to seat. And there is a tension between entry into a deeper selfhood, and yet the perplexity that one can find oneself back in ordinary bodily consciousness. In other works, Plotinus links some of these elements to the experience of intellect itself, which must give up its intellectual nature, walk backwards, veil itself from other things. For instance, on the basis of analysis of light, which cannot be grasped as an object, but is the medium and power in which everything else is seen, Plotinus argues that to see light as light would therefore be like seeing nothing. So intellect, veiling itself from other things, drawing itself together inward and seeing nothing, will look, not at one light in another, but at light alone and pure, itself in itself suddenly appearing from itself, so that intellect is at a loss how it appeared, from outside or within, and when it has gone away will say, it was within, and yet it was not within. This need to move beyond one's own perspective to an entirely different vantage point, that of intellect, or ultimately of the one, informs many of Plotinus' attempts to break the normal boundaries of language and to indicate the indescribable. Why should there be this urge for the transcendent? Because, as Plotinus puts it, the real desire of our soul is for what is greater than herself, though he is also aware that all our experiences are double-edged and that even our desire for the good can sometimes get us into trouble. For in fact, the desire of good often involves the fall into evil. The soul naturally then is in love with God and wants to be united with him. It is like the noble love of a noble daughter for her noble father. This love transforms one's entire perspective. So then one does not see or distinguish or imagine two, but it is as if one had become someone else and is not oneself. But having come to belong to that, is one having joined, as it were, center to center. For here too, when the centers have come together, they are one, but two when they are separate. In this sense, we also speak of another now. That is why the vision is hard to put into words. Human experience may be inadequate for understanding the intensity of union with the one, but love and friendship give us a sense of real perspectival change, of what it is like, for instance, to belong to another or to experience without self-deception the other's well-being as more important than one's own. Consequently, the approach to the One is not even really contemplation, but another kind of seeing, a being out of oneself, a simplifying, and giving oneself over and desiring for touch and rest, and a thought that seeks in every way to fit itself. If one will see what is in the sanctuary. Finally, this natural desire for the soul is so real that in some passages it even appears to lift soul, or you or me, the perceivers, not only up into intellect, so that she, the soul, becomes intellect, but through intellect to the One. In a striking passage from one of Plotinus' greatest works, How the Multiplicity of Forms Came into Being, and On the Good, the person who sees is carried out of the beauty of the intelligible world by the surge of wave of intellect itself, and lifted on high by the swell, as it were, one saw suddenly, not seeing how, but the vision fills his eyes with light, and has not made him see something else through it, but the light itself was what one sees. What is this swell, or surge, of intellect? Plotinus likens it to a perspectival change. It is as if someone entered into a richly decorated house, and so beautiful, and inside it contemplated each of the decorations, and was astounded before seeing the master of the house. But when he sees the master, and takes delight in him, not in accordance with the nature of the images, but as worthy of real vision, he lets these things go, and looks at him alone from then on. And then, as he looks and does not take his eye away, he no longer sees a sight by the continuity of his vision, but mingles his seeing with what he contemplates, so that what was seen before has already become seeing in him, and he forgets all other objects of vision. The simplest form of seeing, Plotinus insists, is one by which intellect looks at what is beyond it by a simple sort of awareness and reception. Intellect is no longer in its right mind, but has to be drunk on nectar, a loving intellect, and out of its mind. It is better for it to be drunk with such drunkenness than to be more respectably sober. Again, the two moments of activity and passivity are unified in this experience. Then it loves, simplified into enjoyment of fullness. In mystical union, therefore, the simplicities of desire, simple touch, openness, even drunkenness, come into a radically new perspective.